Do you have writer's block? Well, you've come to the right place. Okay, so let's begin by acknowledging that writer's block happens. It isn't just some made-up thing. Everyone encounters it at one time or another. We are committed to doing our work, and then the next thing we know, the day is over and no work was accomplished. It happens to everybody, except for maybe Stephen King. He churns out books like clockwork. He is a book writing machine. But most of us aren't, and that's okay. There are so many things that can lead to writer's block. Insecurity, shame, too much time online. But there are things that can help. Let's cure that writer's block. Ready, set, go. The first thing you can do is revisit the core psychological issue underlying most forms of writer's block, the drive for perfection. As I've mentioned many times this semester, William Stafford said, "There's no such thing as writer's block for writers whose standards are low enough." Before you can tackle writer's block, you have to begin by letting go of perfection. Along with the idea of letting go of perfection is the practice of embracing the mess. This is hard for many students who want the process to be really linear. First I jot down ideas, then I pick one, then I write an outline, then I write the paper, then I edit the paper, then I'm done. For most professional writers, the process is much more complex than that, and sometimes doesn't have a clear roadmap. Remember that quote from Bird by Bird? E.L. Doctorow once said that writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Lamott goes on to say, "You don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to see your destination or everything you will pass along the way. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you." This is right up there with the best advice on writing or life I have ever heard. Along the same lines, Austin Kleon, whose TED Talk on stealing like an artist I often assign in my classes, wrote, "It doesn't matter if it's good right now. It just needs to exist." What he means by that is you can't do something with nothing. As a teacher, I can't help improve a paper that doesn't exist. But if you have a bit of chicken scratch on a napkin, we've got something to work with. So, going back to Anne Lamott, she says you have to start with the shitty first draft, the terrible first effort. Go back and read Bird by Bird if you're struggling. But if your existential crisis is so deep that even Anne Lamott can't straighten you out, I have some practical tips for overcoming writer's block. Hang in there. This is a long list. First off, ignore your audience. Often, when I find myself struggling to write, it's because I'm imagining a teacher I once had as my audience. Nothing I ever wrote was good enough for her. She was nitpicky, and her comments were completely unhelpful. When I imagine her reading my papers, it paralyzes and silences me. I usually have to pretend there is no audience at all to get going again. You can also choose a kind and loving individual as your audience for your first draft. Forget about the teacher with the weaponized red pen, as my friend Billy put it. Here's another fix for writer's block. Stop writing and go for a run, or a swim, or a bike ride, or a hike, or whatever. Exercise, especially repetitive and linear exercise, can help unlock your writing brain. Seriously, give it a try. And if high-intensity running and workouts aren't your thing, walks will help too. You'd be surprised how many famous writers are also long-distance walkers. It really, really helps. Along the same lines, if you are struggling to get something written in your dorm room or office or wherever it is you are working, try moving to another location. I sometimes write in my campus office or my home office or the kitchen table or bed or library or outside or at a coffee shop. Those location changes can be really powerful writing generators. You can also try changing your medium. If you've been working on a computer, try writing by hand. If you've been writing by hand, try working on a computer. You can try switching to different types of handwritten tools too. Pencil versus pen versus marker versus crayon. You'd be surprised how much that difference can make. See if you can get a hold of a typewriter. It's so weirdly different than the quiet keyboards we're used to now. Another weird thing that sometimes works is trying to change your font. There has been some evidence that Comic Sans, derided as it is, helps people write more efficiently. I don't understand why it works, but apparently it does. That might make a fun research paper for one of you. Also, try switching up your music. If you usually listen to music, try silence or white noise. I usually write listening to spa music or relaxation music on YouTube. It helps to set the vibe and can sometimes help to drown out distractions. If you are someone who can listen to your favorite band while writing, more power to you. But many of us end up listening to the music instead of working. You need to figure this one out for yourself. Earlier this semester, I suggested starting in the middle of things as a good writing strategy. It is a good storytelling device, but it can also be helpful if you have writer's block. Sometimes the amount of backstory is overwhelming, and that makes it feel hard to start. In that case, just start somewhere in the middle. You have to start somewhere. And bonus, it'll be more interesting for your reader. Doodling has been shown to be an effective strategy for concentration and as a precursor to writing. Linda Berry, whose book What It Is we have read excerpts of, she always begins her classes by having her students make a long, tight spiral on a scratch sheet of paper before they ever start working with words. For whatever weird psychological reason, it really does work. Similarly, sketch notes can be really helpful. We practice a version of this early in the semester with our memory maps. When you try to make abstract things visual, something clicks in your brain and it helps you understand it better, which can lead to better writing. As this image shows, sketch notes simplify ideas, help you draw a connection between ideas, help you organize and summarize ideas, aid in comprehension, help with memory retention, give access to metaphors, engage your attention, immerse you in the learning experience, and develop your sense-making skills, and provide tools for communication. I'd call that a pretty all-star strategy. Another visual strategy to use is Post-it notes. Index cards work for this too, but the nice thing about Post-its is you can put them up on your wall. As you come up with ideas, you write them on the Post-its. Then you can rearrange their order and play with the relationships between ideas. This is really handy for those of you who are kinesthetic learners, those of you who learn by doing. It makes the ideas concrete and easy to manipulate. Spider graphs are another strategy that can be very helpful to visual learners. Generally, the way to do this is to begin with a theme in the center circle and sub-themes in the outside circles. Then add examples of the sub-themes in the smaller circles. This is a really quick and visual way of exploring ideas, especially when you don't feel particularly inspired. Of course, you always have free writing at your disposal too. Free writing is when you write continuously, without stopping, for a set amount of time on any topic that comes to mind. It's about freeing up your mind and letting go of perfection. You can also do focused free writes, which is when you begin with a loose idea of a topic. Another strategy is to loop your free writes, meaning that you repeat free writing sessions with breaks between, looking for patterns and sweet stuff. With looping, your free writes become more and more focused as you go. You can also use guided free writing tutorials. My favorite is available on YouTube if you search for Linda Berry writing The Unthinkable. She takes you through a process of writing about cars, but you can use just about any noun. Houses, moms, rooms, dogs, bodies of water, watches, coffee cups, anything. Another thing to try when you're stuck and fighting writer's block is to talk it out with someone or with yourself. I use my husband as a sounding board. There are a lot of people who process information better verbally than on paper, and if that sounds like you, I suggest you give this a try. And if you don't have someone to work with, you can also try talking into a recording device. Here's a quirky technique. Instead of writing from your own perspective, try tackling the writing assignment from someone else's perspective. If it's a persuasive paper, try writing from the opposing view. If it's a personal narrative, try writing from the point of view of someone else who was there. If you try using a different point of view, you can actually play with using a different style and tone of voice to match the perspective. Doing this can sometimes make it a bit silly and fun, which is a great way to shake off a block. Also, remember you don't have to do everything all at once. Remember Bird by LaMotte? Well, remember that tiny picture frame and her advice to start small? Take on short, discrete hunks, one at a time. For some of you, and me, who are procrastinators, you might need to create a writing schedule and give yourself short, frequent assignments. Sometimes self-imposed deadlines can feel meaningless, and that's why I recommend creating little rewards for yourself as you go along. This might be the scariest piece of advice of all. Sometimes you have to step away from the keyboard. Take a walk, take some deep breaths, read a book, have a snack, escape for a minute. When I'm in the throes of writing, sometimes I'll schedule breaks and say, okay, after 1 hour I will stop and do some squats. After 2 hours I will grab some tea and walk around the block. Breaks help to refresh and reset the brain, and they are essential. If you're staring at a computer screen and nothing's happening, step away. And while you're stepping away, you might want to do something mindless. Washing dishes, running a vacuum, something that doesn't require much mental activity. These kinds of activities can help your brain rest. And have you ever heard of shower thoughts? This is when you have an aha moment while doing something routine like showering. Give yourself the gift of going on autopilot every so often. It will help your writing. I usually teach Austin Kleon every semester at his concept of stealing like an artist. Sometimes, when you can't think of something to say or write about, it can be really helpful to look at something someone else has done and use that as inspiration. If you decide to steal like an artist, you're not wanting to plagiarize. Instead, you want to put your own spin on the idea and find a way to freshen it up or take it to the next level. Stephen King says that if you don't have time to read, you don't have time or the tools to write. The more you read, the easier writing will be. And I'll just say it, a little research can do wonders for a bad case of writer's block. Something you'll notice about all of these techniques is that it starts with producing a lot of junk. Or, as David Perell says it in more positive terms, you should start with abundance. You've got to gather your supplies, which is your spider graph of ideas, your research, your multiple free writes, your shower thoughts, and your short assignments. Once you have all that gathered, it's a matter of revision and scaling things back and removing clutter. Some students might feel like starting with abundance and spending all that time goofing off with invention activities and breaks and drawings and spider graphs, etc., etc., etc. They might feel like that's a waste of time. I want to remind you about what Linda Berry says. She says in order to escape those dreaded 2 questions, The obsession with, is it good and does it suck? You have to assume that you might end up wasting time and materials. But I'll tell you from experience that spending time doing these kinds of activities actually speeds up the writing process a lot, when you have writer's block in particular, and often makes the writing process move along more quickly. It is a good investment of your time to try these strategies out. When in doubt, turn off the internet. In fact, just always do that unless you're researching and the internet is vital. The internet can be a huge distraction. I could tell you numerous stories of times when turning off my internet access made me a more productive person, but I'll spare you. It works. Finally, remember that the best way to become a better writer is to write, 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 and write some more. Writer's block is real, but it usually strikes when the goal is perfection rather than completion. Happy writing.